Here's an example of the lamps I make. So probably the two main products this year that I've been making and selling are lamps and peppermills. Peppermills are probably, so if you don't know who I am, wood turning is my full-time job, and the main way I sell my stuff is through art shows. I'm about 8 shows deep in this year, and I've probably sold 70% of my sales have been peppermills, probably 20% is lamps. So I'm really focusing heavily on peppermills. They just seem to really be what people want this year. But lamps, they do sell really well. So a new thing I added this year was making my own shades. Previously I was just buying like Menard shades for 10 bucks. So these are made with veneer. This is kind of like the first generation I made of shades. Now I'm kind of starting to use styrene and paper on styrene, so it's like a lampshade material. It's more translucent, so that's one reason I kind of switched to that. And then it's also, I don't know if you can see this in here, but over time this veneer is on a paper back, so it kind of doesn't accept moisture very well, so eventually it gets waves in it, and this one doesn't look too bad, but some of them I have are really wavy, and with the finish on it, it kind of has a glare, so I've kind of moved away from this. This lamp is actually one that my fiance and I have in our house, so that's just one I brought with the show. And also, these shades, they take a lot of work. It's probably a couple hours at least in each shade, cutting all the wood trim, and there's actually quite a bit of material in the trim and the veneer. I have to buy that, so I had to add probably $100 to $150 to the price of this lamp to have my work worth it for the shade. So just kind of going through the shows, one benefit of them is that your customers really always kind of let you know what is going to work for your business and what's not. And I'm always kind of pivoting and learning what is going to sell the best and what's worth my time. I have to be as efficient as possible when I'm making things to make sure I'm not wasting my time. So I'm kind of moving away from these shades now, actually. It's kind of a shame. I spent many hours. I made probably 50 of these veneer ones, and then I discovered that they warp and they aren't as stable as I would like them to be. So then I moved over to using styrene and lampshade material, and then I kind of learned that they just aren't worthy of that price increase. So currently I'm at the point I've got store-bought lampshades and these ones with the styrene in my booth, but still learning. That's just kind of a thing that if you want to go into business with woodworking or wood turning, you just always kind of have to be adjusting to what your customers tell you. But that's enough about the shade. I'm going to focus more on the lamp base itself tonight. I'm just going to get a few things set up here. So that particular lamp is cherry with a cherry base. So it's 2 separate pieces. The base is about 2 inches thick generally and about 6 or 7 inches diameter. And then I do the height in a few different heights. This one is 16 inches. The one I'll be doing tonight is a 12-inch. And then so you can see there's 2 separate pieces here, the base and the actual lamp itself. So how I join those 2 pieces together, I use a mortise and tenon. So I drill a hole 1 5/8 diameter through the entire base, and then I make that size tenon on the bottom of the lamp about probably only like 3/4 of an inch long, and then that's how I glue them and screw them in together. So that's how those 2 pieces secure to each other. And tonight, this piece I'll be turning is aspen. So it's a much softer wood than cherry, but it is very stable and makes a good lamp. I color my wood, so aspen is going to take much brighter colors than what you see here. It's not going to show as much grain. And then for the base, I have this is a kiln dried piece of white oak. This is an offcut from some wood bought from a lumber yard. So this is probably a board 1.5 feet, so this is expensive wood if you were going to buy it, but my dad and I have a sawmill, so typically that's not the kind of wood I would be using. I would be using probably a red oak that we have on our land that we would cut 2-inch thick slabs out of, and then I just take this piece and cut it out on a circle in the bandsaw and then put it on the lathe to turn it. So I'm just gonna start with the stem of the lamp, and my style is it's kind of like this. As you can see, I like to use all different shapes that wood turning has to offer: coves, flats, beads, points, and discs. Those are basically the 5 main shapes you can make in spindle turning. And I try to just kind of combine those all together to make it kind of flow as best it can. The shapes kind of complementing each other and just kind of making your eye gradually look through the piece. So another thing you have to think about when making a lamp is how do you get your hole drilled all the way through so that the wire can be ran up through the piece of wood. There's a few different ways to do that. I'll go over that when I get to that point. But one way people do it is, instead of using a full solid piece of wood, you could glue up a piece with a small 1/2-inch square channel in the center of your piece of wood. If you're like a segmenting, turning kind of person, that's one way you could do it. It's definitely a lot more work, but if you're not comfortable drilling through your piece of wood, that's one option to look at. But I feel that the drilling is pretty easily acquired, but I definitely have gotten pretty thin on some lamps before and then drilled through the side of the piece. And then you kind of have to get creative on how you fix that. But, don't judge a wood turner on his mistakes, but judge him how you can fix your mistakes, I guess. So I'm just going to use a live center as my cone center, and then a steb center for my drive center. All right. Slightly off center, but that's okay. So I just went ahead this morning and roughed this piece to round so I don't make as big of a mess. All right, so I'm going to be using just a few traditional wood turning tools. On the base, I'll be using more of a 5/8-inch bowl gouge. And for the stem, I'll be getting a rough shape with my rough spindle gouge, get some more cove details with the spindle gouge, and then some flats, points, and discs with the skew. So first step here is to make sure everything is tight, solid, and locked in. And I'm just going to be using the spindle roughing gouge to, it might not be plugged in.
Is that the one? Yeah.
There it's on. Yep. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is get this true with spindle roughing gouge, and then I'm going to move on to the skew to make my my tenon at the very bottom. So the base of this lamp stem is going to be towards the headstock, and the top of it will be towards the tailstock. Okay, just get that true. Um, Actually, I brought my own tool rest along, but I do like Steve's tool rest better. My lathe is a Laguna, and this is the tool rest that comes with it. The reason Steve's is better is because it has more beef on the sides. As you can see from this one, there's not too much metal on the sides here, and if I'm turning on the very edge of it, I'm likely going to get some vibration, not too much support there. So that's why I like this one better. No, he didn't. No. I don't even own one of these yet, but I need to get one. Okay, so I'm going to be using a peeling cut with the skew to kind of rapidly remove about 3/4 of an inch of wood right at the bottom. And that eventually is going to go down to a 1 5/8" diameter. So at this point, I'm not going to get it exactly there. I'll probably get it down to about 2 inches and then just leave it there. So when you're doing this cut, the bevel is not fully engaged. So if your bevel is fully engaged, it's going to catch kind of and not cut super cleanly. If your bevel is not engaged enough, you're scraping into the wood. So there's kind of a happy medium. And as I'm cutting into the wood, I'm arcing the back of my handle up to accommodate for the shape changing. So as that shape changes, my bevel has to continue the same angle with the wood. If I don't raise the back of the handle, it's going to adjust the angle and start to scrape or start to catch. So as you can see, all right. So that's about the width and diameter I want at this point. So that's a good cut to remove wood really fast. It really does damage a lot to the end grain fibers. As you can see, it really tears those out. So the next cut I'm going to do is with the skew again. I'm going to use the long point of it and slice through this end grain to clean up that surface. And this surface is going to be what sits on the top of the lamp base. So I want it to be slightly undercut so it doesn't have any rock or any gap at the bottom of it. So with this cut, I just make a slight chamfer. Again, I'm raising the back of the handle once the cut is engaged. And I'm going to take a few passes to make this. Okay, now I'm going to clean up my tenon just a little bit to make it look better. Alright, shut it off, see what that looks like. Alright, so that's clean, good enough for now. Next thing I'm going to move into is kind of just roughing out a shape with my spindle roughing gouge. I'm not going to do any detail or shoulders or anything right now. I'm just going to get a nice idea of the shape. I'm just kind of go off on a whim and get a shape started with the spindle roughing gouge. So one thing I'm not too concerned about is the diameter of the top. All it really has to do is accept the neck of the lamp. So I really can get pretty narrow at the top of this. But at the bottom, I kind of want to keep that fairly large. Or for sizing purposes, I want the top to be definitely smaller than the bottom. So it kind of looks like it tapers upwards. So when I'm using this tool, I'm always kind of focusing on cutting downhill. The bevel of the tool is generally always engaged, and I'm usually cutting on the wings of the tool. I do use the center of it sometimes, but that's usually only when you're at the bottom of the cut. So when I'm starting on the side, or at the top of the cut, I really am focusing on being on that wing with the bevel engaged. So what I did there, I'm kind of rotating the tool as I'm cutting downwards just to get a nice, more sharp cut. And then I get that corner kind of engaged at the bottom when I'm at the bottom of the cut. That just kind of gives you a sharper edge. All right, so got a nice general shape here. Nothing too specific at this point, but I have a more weight at the bottom of it, nice sized base. I'm gonna do probably try to make a nice circular bead here in the middle, add some more small detail beads at the top, and then clean up this top as well. If anyone has any questions, just shout out at me anytime. So I'm going to switch over to my skew now and try to get nice smooth surfaces, try to minimize my sanding as much as I can. Another thing to be careful of is small diameters more towards the center. That's just going to increase my risk of going through the side when I do my drilling. So that's just one thing to worry about. Probably about 1.5 inches diameter. This is probably about at 2 inches right now. 1.5 inches is about as small as I want to go. All right, so with the skew, I like to use the tool rest slightly higher than I was before. This is probably just barely above center, just slightly above center. So I'm doing a kind of elongated cove through here using the bottom 2/3 of the skew. Coves are definitely a lot harder with the skew, but when I have a kind of an elongated cove, it's much more doable, but it may not be the best tool for the job. Switching over to the long point here to get some depth and definition. A key with the skew is really focusing on pivoting the tool and kind of being super stable with it. With the skew, you're kind of always fighting it catching. So if I come at the piece of wood like this, it wants to push it the other direction. I want to be stable enough with the tool, having it connected to my body more so I can have control of it and pivot it straight down this direction.
Hey, Tyler.
Yeah.
You said you moved here now, right?
Yeah, I just got a shop rented. It's between like Coal Valley and Orion, so. Yeah.
So any of you people that are interested,
Yeah.
he comes in a lot of times during the open turnings, and if there's something that he's doing tonight that you want a little more hands-on, a lot of times he comes in here to do work for his business, but he also he's helped quite a few people learn how to do some of the stuff he does.
Yeah, and I'm going to be coming into open turnings a lot more now. I've just been really busy getting the start of the show season going and keeping up with the inventory. I don't have enough inventory right now, but I will be coming in. It's not very fun to turn wood all by yourself every day of the week, so this kind of is nice to change it up for me. And
He used to live in Wisconsin.
yeah, I used to live in Wisconsin, but yeah. but now I'm engaged to a girl down here, so I'll be here more. That's how it works, yeah.
She's going to school to be a chiro, so
Yeah.
I think she's got her out the way.
Maybe not later down the road, but right now, I gotta make wood turnings right now. All right, so that's enough of the skew for right now. Let's switch over to the spindle gouge. So, not too happy with this shape I was getting with the skew. That's where the spindle gouge will make it look a lot better. You can get more of a dramatic cove. So there's kind of a controversy in the wood turning world of if a spindle gouge can do everything that a skew can. I'm kind of under the belief that a spindle gouge can do everything that a skew can, but there's always so many different ways. There's no absolutes in wood turning. There's just so many different techniques and ways you can achieve different shapes. Every shape I'm making tonight you could achieve with a like a diamond-shaped carbide tool, but I feel like it's more so just the surface you can achieve and the efficiency that you can get it at. So I do think the skew is better in some ways, but in other ways it's not. So it's kind of a complicated subject.
And if anybody has any questions that they want to ask during his presentation, just raise your hand. I'll bring the mic around. He's pretty good at turning and answering questions at the same time.
Okay, I just got a little too thin there, so I'll have to be careful when I do drilling on that. But. What's that? Match sets. I've done some custom orders where people want two of the exact like bedside table lamps. I don't really have any secrets on how you do it. Just put the other one right in front of you. I'm not big on measuring things, to be honest. I don't like measuring too much, but if the customer is that picky on having each shape exact, they're not really the customer for me. But I make sure I let them know that it's going to be to the eye pretty exact. But if you go up and measure it, it's not going to be perfect. So
Tyler, when
yeah.
when you're moving the tool, are you doing it by feel? Is there a certain aspect of it that you're looking for?
You mean in the shapes I'm making, or in?
So, like when you were moving down the cove, you probably could have gone faster,
Right.
but because obviously you could see how it's polishing behind the tool. But do you prefer going slower, or is there a particular feel you're looking for as to how fast?
How fast I
you're
move through the
moving?
cut?
Yeah.
It is kind of just feel.
Okay.
But you know, speed in wood turning is speed. Your speed is very important, but with a tool like the skew, for example, you can turn at 300 RPMs and achieve as smooth as a surface. It's all about the speed of the feed of your cut. So if I just slow down the speed I'm feeding the cut at, yeah, you need a sharp tool to be able to do something like this, but so Yeah, speed definitely matters, but
I'm just thinking, you mentioned that it wants to catch. So
right.
Are you fighting the catch, or are you essentially finding that happy medium where it's not pulling it too much? But you're
Yeah,
also not-
it's all about a happy medium, I would say, because at some point you're not going to be able to fight the catch. It's going to grab it aggressively enough to knock it off course, and then you won't be able to adjust back.
How fast are you running it when you work?
With a piece like this, I go about 1,800, 2,000, something like that, typically. All right, so I'm gonna lower my tool rest there because I'm gonna switch back to the spindle gouge. Do some coves. So here's another kind of trick, but typically with the spindle gouge, you can't go uphill with it. But when you're doing more of a shallow cove like this, to do the entire cove in one sweep, I go through the bottom, come back up. And when I'm going uphill, I'm kind of just more so focusing on shearing upwards with the wing of the tool. And if you're not doing it correctly, it's going to tear out, which I think I did here. Yeah, I did.
Hey, was all three of these ones that you did?
I'm not
remember?
sure. I can't remember.
Okay.
But I think I did that one with the
This
ring or something. Yeah.
This, these things that he did,
Alex
he was
maybe.
just messing around. But this is out of a 2x9, a piece of pine, 2x4. And I mean, you talk, he can do this in 10 minutes. And when it comes to real small spindles, it's awesome. And then we started this one with the, I'm sure you guys seen a video on it, with the ring, and we sand it a little bit.
I think that took me 3 hours.
He does it very fast. And especially to be able to do something, and he is saying that fine, that's him actually as he goes. It feels like it's been sanded.
Mine is sanded, so that was another 2 hours.
To get a nice, consistent cove with a spindle gouge, I focus a lot on locking the handle into my body and then just kind of pivoting my hips through the cut. That way I don't get any ridges or any inconsistencies in the cut. So as you can see here, I establish the cut and I just kind of push my body through the cut. All right, so I'm just gonna finish this up here. Slicing through end grain, I did the bottom with the skew. I'm gonna do the top here with the spindle gouge. It's important to kind of be higher up on the wood here and working my way down as I come in. If you can see that. All right, I'm not going to do any sanding or anything tonight, but this is basically the extent of the stem of the lamp. And now I'm going to move it over to the base of the lamp.
Tyler, can we send
Yeah,
that
you
just
can
so they
pass
feel?
there. Yeah.
And being a little piece like a 2x4.
All right, so this is kind of like a bowl blank, honestly, at the start. And I'm just going to turn this in between centers. There's a few different ways you can go about mounting this on the lathe. I've found this kind of to be the easiest way possible for me. So when I'm mounting this, all I've got is a center hole from my protractor when I drew a circle on here to begin. So I line that up with the cone center, and then I kind of give it a spin to see if it's running true. It's not at the moment, so I adjust it slightly, and I just get it as true as I possibly can. And that's less true. All right, that looks pretty good. So this is one thing I want to have much more stable. You obviously want your piece of wood always stable on the lathe, but this just has more likelihood to break or fly off. Okay, so with this piece of wood, we have end grain running towards us, at us, and face grain on the two sides. So using a bowl gouge, I kind of want to always, not always, but it's generally going to cut easier if I'm pushing the tool towards or through the face grain rather than going down into the end grain. So first thing I'm going to do is mount my tool rest slightly below center, right on the corner of the wood, almost as this was a bowl. So if this was a bowl, I'd basically be rounding the outside of the bowl. I'm going to do more of a convex shape. So this corner right here is this edge right here.
Hey, Tyler, this
Yeah.
aspen that you use, it's pretty soft wood, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty soft. It's similar to basswood or poplar, but it's much hard. It's harder than those two woods, I would say. It has a lot
It
more.
probably takes the stain
Yeah,
that you use pretty good.
it does take the color a lot brighter than something like a harder wood.
Would you put a harder finish on it to protect it from like dings?
It is more susceptible to dings, definitely. I lacquer all my larger wood turning pieces. This is lacquered, sprayed on. I do a lot of CA finishing for my pepper mills just because they get handled a lot more and I want them to be more durable. So these are susceptible to dings and dents, but being a lamp, it's not going to see too much wear and tear, I think. All right, so we're all locked in here. We're gonna start turning about 1,000 RPMs. I'm gonna lower my tool rest a little more. 5/8 inch bowl gouge coming through the side, get the top trued up, and make a slight convex is what we'll start with. So again, with this cut, I'm really focusing on having the tool mounted to my body, being as stable as I can. One thing I like, some reason this always kind of makes me think about it, but I'm sure you've all seen a CNC lathe with a diamond cutter, carbide bit. And why does that thing never catch? I think it's because, one, it's scraping the wood pretty much, but it's also because that thing is so stably locked in, it doesn't have any room for error, and that's what causes your catch is a slight adjustment to the angle of the tool, and then it just kind of grabs it and aggressively catches it. So why that CNC router lathe never catches is because that thing never wants to move. So the more stable my tool is, the less likely I am to catch. So I think the key to wood turning is having a stable tool, but also having fluid motions with that stable tool. Having a happy medium between those two is basically how you perfect your cuts. So, any of you have ever turned oak before, it's more susceptible to tear out. It's definitely not going to be as nice to you as aspen would be. But with a sharp tool, you can still achieve nice, smooth finishes. Okay, just adjust my tool rest a little bit there, and I'm gonna, I don't know if you saw that, but I have a knot here that looks pretty easily removable, so I'm gonna bring that back a little more. And I turned my speed up a little bit more now that I'm round. I'm at about 1500. Okay, so I got a nice general shape here. Next step I'm going to do is the top surface and the bottom surface. You can kind of see that they're not exactly true. They have a little wobble to them. So I'm going to get those true and slightly undercut. So this surface is what the top or the bottom of that lamp is going to be sitting on. So I want them to marry together pretty well, no gap, no rock. So I'm going to kind of step this cut down. And do sort of a pull cut back into my body. This is not really a shear cut, it's almost more of a scrape, but kind of a controlled scrape, so it's trying to give me as best surface as I can get. And I go right up into my cone center. I'll show you later with the hole I drill through, with the little nub that is left there. That's kind of what I want. Okay, let's see what surface that got me. Okay, so I got some tear up, but I'm not too concerned right now. Generally, the bases of my lamps, I should give them more attention, but I usually only sand to about 100 grit, and then color and stain over top of that usually hides any imperfections that's in there. So now I'm going to switch over to the bottom. Make sure it was still tight in case anything adjusted. Oops. And I'm gonna start at the top and step my cut down in, slightly tapering it down inwards. And I'm having to raise the back of my tool as I go in because I'm getting further away from my tool rest, having more of the tool exposed. So if I left it at the same angle, I'd be way too high when I got to the bottom. I have to slightly raise the back of my handle. And just like the other side, I'm going right up to the drive center.
And Tyler, it looks like it's mostly closed, the flute, right? It's mostly closed.
Mostly closed, yep. If you're open with the flute, you're gonna get a catch, a nasty one too. Yeah, if I were to touch the wood like this, you can kind of see the ergonomics of it, how that would go over the top of the tool and not be good. I'm gonna round the bottom of this edge here to kind of make it look like it's elevated. And now I'm going to switch over to using the nose of the tool and go in from the outside. So that cut, you can usually get a pretty smooth surface, but it usually leaves like slight ridges and undulations when you do it. I'm not too concerned about those. Those would come out with sandpaper pretty easily, but I'm going to call that good as of now. Okay, so now I'm going to switch over to my spindle gouge on this faceplate work to get some more detail. Bowl gouge does a really good job of roughing that shape out, but it's so fat at the tip that it really can't get in narrow spots and give me nice detailed beads. So I'm going to put a little bead here at this transition point, focusing on rolling my tool over at the bottom of my cut so I can get a nice crisp definition at the bottom of it. Put the top of the bead here. Something I have to be careful of is the size of this bottom. I don't know where that lamp went. Oh, that's it. I just have to make sure I'm not too small there. But I can adjust that too. I have to put that back on the lathe to fit that later. So I'm just gonna do a finish cut here. Okay, so this is a nice sharp spindle gouge, so it really seems like it's leaving me a nice surface. I'm going to go into end grain here, kind of breaking my rule, but I want to make this shape a little more cove. Okay, I think I'm going to call this good, see what it looks like. Okay, not too much tear out and a decent shape, so I'm going to call that good. All right, so at this point we have our lamp base and our lamp stem, you can call it, turned. And it looks like I want a little more showing, so I'm going to make this a little smaller when I put this back on the lathe. But to drill this hole, now I'm going to kind of go into the assembly portion of this. But to drill this hole, I generally always use the drill press. I don't want to bring it in there or anything tonight. Use the drill press and make a mess in 2 different spots. So I'm going to use a drill and a Forstner bit. So I use an 1 5/8" diameter carbide Forstner drill bit. That's just kind of the size I've found to work best for me. And the way I do it on the drill press is I have a drill press with a circular stand with a small, like 1-inch diameter hole in the very center of that platform. So I have a nub here at the top and a nub at the bottom that protrudes out more than the surfaces. So I start with the bottom on the surface and I put that little nub in the center of the hole so it's perfectly centered. And I go halfway through. I already have a center hole here on the top from my drive center. So I go through that center hole and I drill halfway through this surface, flip it over and drill halfway through this. And then the way this thing cuts is it cuts deeper on the edge of the wings here. So when those 2 holes connect and meet, it kind of leaves a little disc or a little cookie sort of thing. And that is this right here, this little thing. So I save that little disc or cookie and I use that as a plug to kind of give this a more finished look. Otherwise this hole would just be open and kind of showing a wire. The wire comes through here and up through the center, so that just kind of gives it a more finished look. Using the drill, I don't think I'm going to get that cookie thing just because it's not as gentle. No, I think I should do it myself, otherwise I might hurt something. So just get this centered between the lathe beds. then also the problem with doing this with the drill is you slightly get off skewed a little bit. The drill press really makes it a lot better, so you go straight through. All right, there we're through. So those did not line up as perfectly as I wanted, but I got all the way through, so it's going to be good enough to show you how they kind of combine and go to each other. Okay, so then my next step is going to be to put my lamp stem back on the lathe. Try to get this as centered as I possibly can. Sometimes with a step center, it can be a little tougher to get it perfectly centered, but we'll see how good we can do. Looks to run pretty true. And so I'm gonna reduce the size of the bottom here so I can accommodate to what I did there. And I should have checked this before I put it on, but okay, I'm gonna have to take this off. It's kind of trial and error. I should use a caliper right now, but
And Tyler, do you taper that
this tenon.
peg just so that it's easier to slide in, or are you trying to keep it as parallel as possible?
I'm kind of trying to keep it parallel, but I just tapered that slightly because if I went too small, then it would still be snug at the top and not as much at the bottom. But I have about probably 1/8 of an inch to go still. Okay, so see that's off center. That's on center. So I know the bottom didn't fit, so I'm going to make it all parallel first. Get that tear out cleaned up. One more pass. And we'll see what that looks like. All right. So it probably has like a 32nd inch of play, but what I would do is I glue that, let the glue dry, and then I pre-drill 2 holes and put a 3-inch screw on each side of that. So that's where we're at right now. And next thing I'm going to do is drill the hole all the way through this. So this is a 12-inch long piece of wood. It's going to be fairly not easy, but when you have the technique down, this is much easier to do than, say, a hardwood 16 inches long to drill all the way through. But I kind of have a technique I use to do that. So I use this drill bit. It's a 3/8 of inch diameter, which is the typical lamp inner diameter. And so kind of the inner works of this is at the top, there's a threaded rod about 4 inches long that goes through here. That's connected to the neck, and then the wire comes all the way up through that. And that rod is epoxied into that hole, so it kind of has structure, and it's not gonna break loose at the top. It's really strong in there. And then the lamp fixture and the harp is all connected to that. So this isn't really a special drill bit. It's like a $14 drill bit from Home Depot, meant for drilling through 2x4s pretty much, but it works for this too. So what I do is I start with, I think this is going to be like 7/32 inch drill bit, slightly smaller than 3/8. And what I do is I start at the bottom, And I already have my drive center hole there, so that's centered. So what I do is I just focus on pushing this back as centered as I possibly can. Taking it slow. And then I go in about 1.5 to 2 inches. And I let it free flow kind of in my hand, and I can see where it's off center. So it's pretty off center right now, but I can see that it's skewed this way, and I can kind of adjust where I'm drilling, go in another inch. So I fixed it a little bit, but not perfect. Adjust again. So that's better, not as good as I would like it. All right, so I'm all the distance I've got. It's as good as I'm gonna get. Same thing at the top. Start slow. The key is the very first inch. That's the hardest to get center. Once you get that center, you're good. Okay, so that's what you want. You want it to look like it's on the lathe when it's free flow. What's that? No, I have not, but I've drilled through the sides of it, a few of them, that's for sure. All right. So if I'm doing a harder piece of wood, I typically would do, halfway through the top, flip it through the bottom. Actually start at the bottom and then go halfway through the bottom, or start at the bottom, then do through the top. This drill bit is quite dull. So there's actually another method to do this on the lathe. It's called long hole boring. It's basically a kit you can buy from a few different wood turner sources. So there we're all the way through. Just get all the excess out. So what long hole boring is, it's basically that, but a much risky, less way on the lathe. So it's a kit that gives you a very long, like 36-inch drill bit, boring bit with a handle on the end of it. And then it gives you a live center and a drive center. The live center is hollow. So basically you mount this on the lathe, and the 3/8-inch drill bit goes all the way through the tailstock. And you just kind of manually push it through, and being that the live center is hollow, it goes through the live center. And so since it's going all through there, being such little margin for that bit to move, it basically goes straight through. It doesn't have any play, it just goes straight. And then you go halfway through one side, you flip it over, and then that's where the drive center comes into play that it gives you. It's a drive center with 4 prongs, but it has like a 3/8-inch nub where the tip would be, so it can be centered. If you just used a drive center like this, you would never get it exactly centered. You would have it kind of off center. And then so you flip it around, do it through the other side, and your 2 holes connect. It's basically what I just did there. I can see how it would be helpful if you're doing like a 36-inch long lamp or a 24-inch one, but this is basically the longest I go. So one last thing I have to do is drill the hole.
Drilling something that long, what I've been using is a gun drill.
Gun drill?
Do an air,
Oh.
there, put that on there, just it goes right through like butter there, and then the air is blowing the chips back out.
Air, yeah. Air is key too, yeah.
Really works good.
Is that, and that's on the lathe
Yep.
when you do that? Okay.
I just spin it on the lathe and hold the gun drill just by hand, just like you're kind of doing, but I just run that right through. The air hose on the back opens the valve so that
Yeah.
the air blows out to the tips. It's an old gun
Yeah.
drill actually from a machine shop, metalworking.
Oh, okay.
where it was, but
Works for wood
works
too.
real good.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a good way to do it too, because those chips are. I think also I don't have that kit, but I think that the Live Center has a hole on the side of it so the chips have an exit. Otherwise, you'd be having to back it out a lot and
First
kind
time I
of
used
dealing with
that
that.
gun drill, I couldn't believe how smooth it went through there and all the chips just
Yeah,
exit right out the back. So
yeah, that's cool. There's definitely a lot of ways to do something like this. Okay, so next hole I got to drill is the last one. This one for the wire to come out the bottom of the base. So you can do it on the very bottom of the base. You could even do it at the very bottom of the lamp. I've done it both ways. Kind of just always depends on the shape of my base and the base of the lamp. But I think it would look good here. One thing to remember when you're doing this is to kind of look at the piece of your wood and look for any imperfections, because this hole is going to determine what the front of the lamp is and what the back of the lamp is, because that wire obviously isn't going to be sitting out front when it's displayed in a house. So I start with a countersink drill bit, and that kind of just gives it a kind of a countersunk look at the exit point. So just looking at this piece of wood. Also, you're looking at the grain of it too. So you want the best grain to be facing forward. And I think probably this cross section of grain right here would look the best. So I go on the opposite side of that and pick a spot. Make sure I'm drilling straight through that piece, and I'm not going to go out the bottom or the top. I want to go straight through, and more so on the bottom 2/3 of it probably. Oops, don't do that. All right, so that drill bit doesn't go all the way through. Oops. So then I would switch over to my 7/32 and go all the way through with it here. So 7/32, that's big enough for the cord to fit through. So what I would do then is finishing and assembly of the wiring. So basically all you have to do is feed your wire through this hole first, bring it up through, and then come all the way through the lamp, do the wiring at the top, and you're pretty much done with your lamp after you've done, your finishing and sanding and everything else. There's obviously a few steps that I missed and didn't do, but I'll let you guys have those too.
And I assume you pull the wire through and then, or no, you would glue in that threaded piece first and then pull the wire through it?
No, so I pull the wire all the way up through, and then I have that threaded rod connected to this already, everything here, all connected, and I just fit that over top of the wire. The wire comes up through all that, and then I glue that in.
So you're in,
Pull the wire back as you're feeding that, you just kind of.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then you just bring that back down.
but essentially you would pull it out before the glue sets just in case it
Yeah,
glued
and
the
then-
wire.
Right, yeah. And then another thing is I always tie the wire in a knot. There is a lot of EU certifications, more so in Europe than there is in the United States, but I just always make sure the parts I buy are EU certified, and tying a knot at the top so that it can't be pulled out from the bottom. That can be dangerous too, but so try to cover your butt on any wiring certifications there are. Definitely read up on that before you go into making lamps. Anybody else have any questions? Nope. All right, thank you guys. I appreciate it.